Talking about Israel, we've seen now footage released of the dramatic moment that the forces stormed a house that was holding hostages taken October 7. Terrifying, almost looks like a video game. You can't believe that's real. And you may have noticed the fist pump between the one of the hostages and a rescuer there. And despite the wonderful news of these hostages being recovered after 8 months, we've got the likes of the Greens in this country, Patrick, questioning the manner in which the Israelis went about this rescue mission.
Yes, look, I think the Greens are out of step with what Australians believe in and our values. I think if 140 or 150 Australians were taken hostage by another country, every Australian would want this country to do its best to get them back. And that's what's been forgotten in this whole debate in Australia and has been hijacked by the Greens, is Israel, you would expect any country to go and get its own people, to save its own people. Again, it was a terrorist organisation that made all this happen. These awful scenes that we see in Gaza are not because of Israel, not because of anything Israel did on October 7. It's because of what happened, because of what Hamas chose to happen. And look, that footage is critical. Everyone should see that because it is a reminder of what this actually is about.
And they lost a commander during that rescue, the Israelis. So it was a highly risky operation. And I can tell you, and I think everyone, if they're being honest, would admit this, if it was your child who was taken hostage by these terrorists, you would want them back at any cost. And to now scrutinise how they went about it, I think, again, you're holding Israel to a different standard than just about every other country. Now, to a wonderful piece in today's Daily Telegraph by Tim Blair. He has written about the climate cult, noting that Liberal leader Peter Dutton's entirely reasonable review of our self-destructive support for the Paris Agreement is now nudging Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and climate tantrum bluster Minister Chris Bowen towards the lava line. The lava line, you need to read the full column to get that line, but this is self-destruction. And it seems the Labor government is doubling down. The Australians revealed that they're now looking at hiking our carbon emission targets in response to Dutton's comments. Is this going to be Albanese pushing the self-destruct button, or is he on safe ground here? Because once Scott Morrison committed the coalition to net zero, we stopped debating this issue in this country. That's
right. Look, the one point I would make is if you go to a barbecue these days, nobody's talking about the Paris Agreement and whether we're holding up what we have to do. We're talking about energy prices. We're talking about blackouts in the future. We're talking about reliability of something that we've taken for granted for generations. And suddenly it's all up in the air. And to sort of say, well, no, we have this mission. This is our ideology. We're going to make it happen. Everybody else, all the experts say the renewables target is not going to happen. It's not going to happen by 2030. And people want to know that their energy can be reliable and can be relatively cheap. And that's something that I think Albanese and certainly Chris Bowen have lost sight of when they're talking about this. And I think they've misread the electorate somewhat.
I think they have, because they've had the advantage of not debating the coalition on this. The coalition has signed up to these net zero targets. And if there's a real debate, I think they're going to be surprised by where many Australians land. Not the media, they'll have the media on their side, Labor. Before you go, I've got to ask you about this. The Canadian Cancer Society has apologised for using the word cervix in pamphlets and website pages about cervical cancer. They acknowledge that they should use the more gender-inclusive word front hole. I wish I was joking, I'm not. In their apology, they said, "We recognise that many trans men and non-binary people may have mixed feelings about or feel distanced from words like cervix. You may prefer other words such as front hole. We recognise the limitations of the words we've used while also acknowledging the need for simplicity. Another reason we use words like cervix is to normalise the reality that men can have these body parts too." Patrick, for once, speechless.
I think if you go to the oncologist and the oncologist starts talking about your front hole problem, or if you're a man, your golf ball problem or your willy problem, I think at that point you'd probably find another oncologist, wouldn't you?
You would, and you would hope that they would seek some sort of professional help themselves, possibly in the mental health space. Patrick, Carlyon, always a pleasure.
My pleasure.